The Joe Rogan Experience.
My guest here today is Dr. Andrew Hill. He is a neuroscientist, a lecturer at UCLA, and a clinician affiliated with True Brain. He's also with the Alternatives Brain Institute.
There's many different types of meditation, right? The classic meditations of Vipassana, Samatha, Metta, these are all fairly similar in that you pick something, some anchor to hold your attention on. And then simply you notice when you've drifted. Since you have a mind, it will drift. It'll get, dream, remember, wish, plan. And when you notice you're not holding that attention focus, that anchor, you release whatever it is you've gotten distracted by and bring your attention back to the anchor. And that's the rep of meditation. That's it. Oh, I'm supposed to be thinking about this sound, or watching my breath, or listening to one, note or something in a music play. Oh, I've gotten distracted. Oh, let it go. Not now. Back to the focus. Again and again and again and again. And that's the entirety of most classic meditation, is noticing when you've gotten distracted, you've left your anchor of your attention, put down the distraction, go back to the anchor.
So
That's it.
It's not a loss when you get distracted.
Not only is it not a loss, if you aren't getting distracted, you probably aren't alive. If you have a mind, it will get distracted. That's what they do. Your mind pays attention to your pains, your distractions, your wishes, your memories. I mean, it's doing all of these things. If you're able to sit down and shut your mind off, you probably don't have one.
So when people talk about the difficulty that they have in meditation, you think they probably get to that step and they go, I can't do it.
And they're basically saying, I'm not any good at it, instead of saying, well, being good at it or not is not the point. The point is doing it. If you went to the gym and pumped iron and did a bunch of bench presses, were you good at it? Going versus not going is what matters, not critiquing necessarily every little bit of what you do.
Some people are terrified, though, of silence and just sitting alone doing nothing.
Yeah. You tell people, here's how you should meditate, and they go to a meditation class and they have to sit there for an hour and a half. That's a big ask initially. So I often tell folks 20 minutes. And even that can be a big ask for some folks. So I say, take your first 5 minutes and do a concentration practice. Take a very narrow focus. Like, watch the sensation of air crossing your upper lip. Just pay attention to that tickle. That's it. Very narrow, tight, spatial focus. And do that for 5 minutes. By the end of that time, your mind's probably a little more stable. And then do what I call an awareness or insight practice. Watch more rhythmic things like your breath rise and fall, or the sound of traffic going by the road or something.
And when you say your mind is more stable, like how so?
Well, you have less random things popping up in your mind after doing some concentration practice. It feels less busy, less of the monkey mind chatter. It's still there, but it's a little less insistent when you've done some concentration practice. I mean, concentrating on anything sort of redirects your attention resources and what you're thinking about. And if what you're really thinking about is simply attending, focusing for its own sake, then you build those resources and build more strength and resources in focusing. And so then later on, when you're walking around the world, you have a more spacious mind, you have some space between your thoughts, you're less automatically reactive. These are all things that happen as a consequence of developing more resources. So what you do on the cushion or wherever you happen to meditate translates to less reactivity, more sustained focus, better attention, better sleep, less anxiety, less anger. But you aren't practicing all those things. Those things come from having more stable attention, more stable executive function.
Do you use sensory deprivation tanks?
I have not. It might be fun to do, considering I have a sort of ecstatic shamanic.
How does a guy like you not get into that? That seems really bizarre to me.
You can't try everything. I mean, there's all kinds of things that I've gotten into. There's lots of ways you can sort of trick the brain into producing input, even without climbing into a float tank. The simplest hack for that is probably something called Ganzfeld classes. Take a ping pong, cut it in half, trim the edges so they aren't sharp, and essentially make a pair of goggles where you're covering each eye with the ping pong ball, and then sit and look through the white balls at a white wall that you're projecting light onto. So there's some indirect light. And keep your eyes open and stare at the insides of these curved spaces. You can't resolve distance. You can't resolve a flat surface. And after a few minutes, you start hallucinating.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think why I haven't gotten into float tanks is because I have other ecstatic meaning taking you out of ordinary reality. I have other techniques that work really well for me and that I tend to use, like rhythmic movement until your mind, shifts. And then for technology-assisted stuff, I mean, I run a neurofeedback center. I can put you in a state in half an hour, with wires on your head. And so if I want to dial in a specific state, I will dial in a specific state for myself.
There's so much to learn when it comes to the human mind. This is such a fascinating subject of conversation because most people have no idea of what's going on below the surface. It's like we have this unbelievably powerful supercomputer that's running our reality, and we don't have a clue as to how to operate it.
The most complicated machine we know about. The human brain can store more bits of information than there are atoms in the universe. Now, we don't store all that information, but we're never going to run out of storage space. The rubric for that is you take the number of neurons you have, let's say 100 billion. We have more, but 100 billion. And you think about the connections they can make with other neurons. So 100 billion neurons tied to 100 billion neurons. And let's ignore recurrent connections. And let's ignore connections from one neuron to multiple, which does absolutely happen. It's actually the rule versus the exception. And let's ignore the fact that glial cells, which are also brain cells, are also computational. Let's just take the neurons and just take the neurons connected to all the neurons. So number of neurons raised to the power of the number of neurons. So 100 billion raised to the power of 100 billion. That number is larger than the estimate of atoms in the universe. So you can store more bits of information than there are bits of information.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Emily and Vincent are here from Buddhist Geeks. Buddhist Geeks, a convergence of spirituality and technology. Is something like meditation or anything. Are these just sort of human-created technologies to mitigate the natural world?
In a way, they clearly are. I mean, because humans sat thousands of years ago and explored their own minds.
Isn't that fascinating that someone a long time ago was like looking around, people hacking each other to death with swords, and was like, you know, what's going on here?
What is going on?
Why is everybody launching arrows over the top of those walls? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crazy too that people figured out how to pay attention and use their body in a way to produce some of those effects, you know, to be able to get into those kind of states of consciousness and even to stabilize them, you know, as a kind of baseline of existence.
Well, Kundalini masters, people that are really good at Kundalini, I have a friend who teaches it, and he says that he can reach these states where he's interacting with beings that may or may not be there, that he can visually recognize in front of him. Like, he can see it, and I'm like, how are you getting there? And it's just years and years and years of mindfulness and this very specific practice.
Right. Concentration, you know, it's like the ability to focus and to be able to absorb consciousness in one thing seems to be the gateway into which, you know, all of those other experiences can arise. We did a meditation a couple weekends ago, and one of the guided meditations was to imagine a lotus flower in your heart that had 1,000 petals, and each petal was shooting off a beam of clear light that connected with another petal in another being's heart, and that sort of spread out infinitely, but it also went in both directions, like in terms of the atomic and quantum level and the universes within atoms, and it went outward in all directions. And I'm like, wow. Okay, these dudes were like exploring the furthest reaches of the inner cosmos.
That's kind of the beauty of existence, right? Is that there's a lot of mystery to this thing.
Part of that comes from, like, I feel like people can get disconnected from their hearts, and that can be airy-fairy too, but that is real. To be up in the mind and the brain and then forget that there is the feelings and the tenderness and the vulnerability in a positive way, because there's actually a lot of power in the vulnerability. So there's some sort of balance that I think comes into play from some of the Eastern traditions and then some of the Western traditions, because I feel that balance too in the room as we're talking, between opening more into the mystical part of things and then also, you know, needing the concepts, needing the rational mind, needing the science. And where is that balance in our modern world? I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, that's the real question, right? Where is the balance in the modern world? Because the modern world is essentially without balance. And the concept of consciousness in this way is more empowering, or at least gives you a better feeling about the life that you're living, and may enhance that experience, may make that experience a more pleasurable ride.
And it may impact others around you because of mirror neurons and everything else. And one thing that I really like is the practices themselves, the mind training aspect of it. That's what's been really beneficial to me. And that's one of the reasons why I've chosen to continue, because of its impact. So that I have the freedom to really choose how to live my life in a much more full way.
For us, we just want to create a space where people can practice together like they've been doing for thousands of years, sitting and exploring their minds.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
My guests today, one, Jerrod Carmichael, hilarious stand-up comedian. You might have seen him on his television show or his HBO special. He's a brilliant stand-up and just an all-around awesome, interesting, and creative guy. And he brought with him another friend of mine, Jamar Neighbors, who's also hilarious. You might have seen him on Roast Battle. He's an up-and-coming stand-up comic in L.A. and a good friend of Jerrod's. A lot of what makes people feel terrible is that their body is fighting against their brain. Their body holds in so much tension, and they never get an endorphin release, and their body's like an overflowing battery, like oozing out of the sides.
You know, I always like people don't meditate. Like that don't work for people. Like that shit kills it for me.
How often do you meditate?
Like every day. Like
how much time?
20 minutes.
Oh, that's good, man. Look, that is a beautiful thing. If you could force that into your schedule and make sure that that's a part of your life.
I got it from Seinfeld and Oprah now. Doesn't it activate something that all humans have, which is like, so we're supposed to kind of do that, though. Anyway,
well, it
right?
allows you reflection, and also what I think it does, one of the real good things that meditation does is it stops momentum. Because there's like a momentum of shitty thoughts and bad ideas and bad decisions and just anxiety and all these issues that could just accumulate inside your consciousness. Yeah. And they never, when unaddressed, they continue to like push at you from the back. And it's like you're just constantly in the state of momentum of all the bullshit that's going on. But if you have a time for real reflection and just pause, even if you're just concentrating only on your breath, it seems to stop that momentum and give you a chance at like a renewed perspective.
Remember that time I had a spiritual awakening in your house?
Yeah.
Spiritual awakening in his house.
That
what happened? What was it about?
It just hit him one day. Like
I was watching like a Seinfeld interview or something. He was like, yeah, I do it twice a day and something. I was like, man, let me see. So I went downstairs in my room, and I meditated, and I came back upstairs, and I was like, he was sitting on the couch, and I was like, Jerrod, I just had an awakening. He was like, what happened? And I was like, I don't know, man, but the first message I got was, you can't save the world, but you can help. He was like, okay. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go back down to my room.
Yeah.
So when you do it, what's your process?
I sit there, cross my legs, in through the nose, out the mouth, in through the nose, out the mouth, till you get into the state.
Then what are you thinking when you're doing that?
Nothing.
Nothing. Just are you thinking about the breathing?
I think about nothing, and then if I have a task or something, like if I be like, you could do affirmations, you know, like if you be like, hey man, I want to be great on stage tonight, or I want to get this writing done, or I want to, you know what I'm saying, or you can hype yourself up. Whatever intention that you want to do, you know what I'm saying, you set that, and then it'll be easier to complete that task. For me, I have ADD. I'm bad at focusing on things, but that really helps me focus.
You have ADD, but you don't have a problem meditating.
Yeah, because I'm really good at being lazy, and it's kind of lazy to like meditating is kind of like all you got to do is sit there.
It's a chill thing. You like chill
You're not
activity.
moving. Yeah,
and just sit there and zone out, just breathe and focus on the breath, and then all of a sudden your mind starts going into an altered state, and then you'll start.
Yeah, I meditate. I just don't meditate every day, but I definitely feel it. I think exercise does that, especially cardio and especially yoga. Something about yoga classes that just forces you into this state of mind where you're only concentrating on the movements that you're supposed to do. And so if you could clear your head and stay focused on the movements and not delve into, your bank account or what's wrong with your car, or you could just take the time to concentrate only on the yoga, it has this cleansing effect. Most things are not worth freaking out about. The vast majority.
A good question I remember reading is just ask yourself, what problems do I have right now? But genuinely, problems. And the answer may not always be zero, but it's usually surprisingly small. when you think about the base level of Maslow's hierarchy,
right?
Like if that's taken care of, there are things that are ongoing, things to figure out, but like things that you could define as a problem, and then just kind of staying in that space. A lot of times people get calm in like those intense situations, like they can handle like real problems. It's the anticipation of problems and the anticipation of solutions that's what drives you crazy.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, a lot of times real problems, they also sort of enlighten you to the fact that most of the time your problems are bullshit. You break your leg, you go, oh, this is real.
That's an immediate
yeah.
And so just staying in the space of like, all right, you're in a control center.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
What a coincidence that Aubrey from On It is here. So what's up, buddy? What's going on, brother?
Everything's been good, man. It's been a hell of a run. On It's been super exciting. I've been really focusing on deepening meditation. Learned a really cool thing called shamanic breathing, which I was totally skeptical about. Have you ever heard about that?
No, what is that?
All right, so basically what you do is you create these really powerful breaths consecutively. And it's best to do this with a guide. I didn't really know what to expect going through. I was just like, all right, whatever. And what you're trying to do actually is create a state where you're purposefully hyperventilating yourself, which is actually manipulating your pH. What you're trying to do is, like Aldous Huxley would say, is you're trying to obscure the cognitive filter for long enough that your brain allows little gaps. It's like opening the blinds in your brain a little bit so that the rational mind goes away and it allows whatever else that is. Stephen Pressfield would call it the muse, whatever you want to call it, that other information that comes in that isn't quite just produced by your rational mind. And by shutting off a few of the valves, it's actually it feels like you're opening the blinds. Well, again, I was totally skeptical. I was like, what is this shit? This is just breathing. But I got into it. And about 15 minutes in, it turned full psychedelic experience. And it was awesome. And I had me personally, I had like a whole background that kind of came in. That was kind of like a seamless, eternal background, 360 degrees. The most powerful, transformative moment for me was when I saw a visual depiction of what I believed my soul, my spirit self was. It felt intense, but you felt really strong and good after it was done. I really appreciate Aldous Huxley's view on this, which is a lot of people think the psychedelic experience is adding something to you, like adding an experience on. He's saying all you're doing, you're not adding shit. You're taking away your mind. And by taking away your mind, you allow what's already there to come through.
Do you think that this shamanic breathing thing is something that could be taught like in classes, like yoga classes, where you can get a bunch of people to experiencing it together?
I do. I think a lot of these methods need to be explored and proliferated throughout our consciousness as a tool. It needs to be taught like, hey, you want to get back in touch with something that's a little more real, that's a little bit deeper in yourself, that's not clouded by all of the voices of the dream, as the Toltecs say, or our emotions and our needs and our wants and all this crap that's going on in our head. You want to tap into something a little deeper, a little more real, a little more connected to your fellow life. This is one method. This is another method. And I think you could really affect people's consciousness doing it in that way. Breathing, certain types of meditation.
Then my friend Denny got into it.
Yeah.
Denny Propokos.
Mm-hmm.
And Denny, Denny, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, world champion. He's a very good friend, and he's not a bullshit artist at anything. And he started getting deep into Kundalini, and he started doing it every day. And he said, dude, I'm tripping balls. I now believe that all the stuff that I used to think was horseshit. But the Kundalini is specifically designed, according to Denny, to try to stimulate these psychedelic states.
Yeah, and what they're using is breath. And, you can get that in a variety of different ways. And the other thing that I've done is called holotropic breathing, which is pretty much like Kundalini yoga without the yoga aspect. And Kundalini yoga has very little to do with stretching. It's mostly getting in postures and breathing really deep breaths frequently and kind of visualizing drawing energy up from your Kundalini center, which is the base of your body, and then doing these breath works. And I've felt what can happen when you're in these hyper-oxygenated states, and it's really, really powerful. I haven't done the Kundalini yoga in like a proper session. I've just done it a little bit where you kind of bounce up and down and you're breathing and getting these things, but it's accessing that same mechanism, which is basically flooding your body with oxygen and creating these seemingly psychedelic states.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
My guests today are Dan Harris. You might know him from Good Morning America. He's a real meditation enthusiast, and he has a new book out called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. And he's joined today with Jeff Warren, who is the co-author of the book. Jeff is a meditation teacher and a very interesting guy, and I really enjoyed talking to them.
A few weeks ago, I was on a 10-day silent meditation retreat, and as your mind starts to settle and you get more concentrated, there are fireworks. You get a lot of sensations in your body that feel really good. You're seeing things. The mind releases a lot of dopamine and serotonin in response to the reduced chatter that can happen when you're more focused on what's happening right now, as opposed to being caught up in our egoic chatter. At one point, though, I hit a stage that's sometimes referred to as life review, where all the things I'm most ashamed of just started coming up.
Yeah.
I couldn't avoid them. I couldn't sleep, and it was all just right there. I was just thinking about them, and then I started questioning the whole practice and what am I doing here? Is this a waste of time? And I had a conversation with my teacher. One day, I was kind of complaining a lot about the futility of my practice, and he said, surrender. He said, you got to surrender. You got to just stop getting in your head about, are you doing it right and all that stuff. Just let the practice do its thing. As Jeff sometimes talks about it, it's like let time and nature do its work. Just trust that the practice is, we've been doing this for millennia, human beings. There's a reason for that. Just do the practice and stop worrying about it. And the next sit I had was 2 hours long. I could see everything coming up, all of my urges, desires, thoughts, physical sensations, things I was hearing, things I was seeing, because I was very focused at this point. It's all just coming at me, and I'm not reaching for it, and I'm not pushing it away. The unpleasant stuff, I'm not trying to push it away. I'm not trying to grasp onto the pleasant, and it's just... And it's like this incredible video game where you can't move forward if you want to move forward.
It's the anti-video game.
And once you stop wanting, once you just surrender into this thing where you're just non-judgmentally observing whatever comes up in your mind, whether it's fear, whether it's planning lunch, whatever it is, you can start to move forward. And there are ways to retrain the mind. And I didn't know that until my late 30s when I started reading books about Buddhism. And all the things we want the most, calm, patience, compassion, generosity, happiness, these aren't factory settings. These are skills that can be trained, that you can take responsibility for, just the way you take responsibility for your body in the gym. And there are lots of ways to train them. Jeff and I obviously talk a lot about meditation, but there are lots of ways to get at it. But the fundamental good news is you aren't stuck with the patterns that are making you miserable.
Yeah, you're definitely not stuck. And I think that all these things are related. Even like exercise, yoga, you're exercising your mind and exercising your body's ability to manage intense situations. Like yoga poses are very intense, especially hot yoga. It's hard. It's very difficult. It's very testing. And in doing so, you lessen the stress of regular life.
The nuts and bolts basic application of beginner's mindfulness meditation, which is to sit with your eyes closed, bring your full attention to the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. And then as soon as you try to do this, your mind starts thinking about, what's for lunch, where do I need a haircut, where do gerbils run wild, blah, blah, blah. And the whole game is just to notice when you've become distracted in a non-judgmental, friendly way. Oh, yeah, that's anger, that's random thoughts, whatever. Let it go. Go back to the breath. Over and over and over, ad infinitum. And that basic bicep curl for your brain allows you to have a less hostile relationship to your inner chaos. It allows you to see it clearly.
So can I just say something about where it turned a corner for me when I was practicing, because I was a terrible meditator? It was understanding the actual skills that we're building. And that's the thing, I think, that links all of what we're talking about here. When you talk about martial arts, when you talk about being a broadcaster, when you talk about comedy, talk about practice, it's like there are particular kinds of mind-body skills that we're training. There's a feeling that's happening that you can experience when you're training that muscle group. Buddhism talks about the factors of awakening, that you're building up concentration, which is your capacity just to pay attention to what you want to pay attention to. It's like a commitment. Your mind wanders, you bring it back. That's one skill. You're building up clarity, which is your ability to be clear and make discernments of what's happening in your experience. So dialing up that resolution dial. Can I have this centeredness in the middle of what's going on? The beauty of a meditation practice is it makes explicit what those skills are. Mm-hmm. So that's all it is. All practice is about being explicit and deliberate about what qualities of existence, of being, that you want to train in your life. And then you just try to apply it everywhere.
Yeah, and the more you can concentrate on that, the more you'll enjoy this weird experience.
The mystery of this weird experience.
This weird experience that doesn't have an owner's manual.
Yes, yes, dude.
That's one of the things that's always freaked me out about the mind and the body. It's like you have this incredible vehicle and this amazing resource that's sort of operating this vehicle, and no one gets a manual, and you're taught how to handle it by people that don't know what they're doing, whether it's teachers in school or whether it's the kids that you grow up with, or maybe even perhaps your parents or sports coaches. You get shitty operating advice. They're grinding the gears and banging into trees, and no one knows how to handle this thing correctly.
In the West, we've developed a scientific culture that is really robust, but in the East, they actually were working on the owner's manual for the mind. And I think the beautiful thing we're watching now globally, this trend, is the meeting of these two things. And Jeff is one of the people who's most excited about this, is partly why we're such good friends, the meeting of this Western scientific rational culture and this Eastern exploration of the mind.
But bro, I want to just call you on something. Like, I think that's absolutely true, but I also think this understanding, this way of thinking about it, is there in the West as well. That it's like the East has made it explicit in very particular ways, but even within humanistic traditions, if you look at like some of the Greek philosophers, who a lot of them were really mystics, if you look within the Abrahamic traditions, there are these understandings are there as well, and they're describing it in similar ways. And like, you hang out with some priest who spent his entire life like in poor neighborhoods, helping people out, and like totally being present and working on service, and like the way in which that human being has learned how to flourish and has learned how to be present for his community or her community, it's a lot of the same skills. You know, these are human universals.
Now, for the uninitiated, all this is very hard to absorb. They're sitting back and then listening to this conversation and trying to put all these pieces together. What's the best first step to take?
Actually try meditation is the best step to take. And here's the thing to know. This doesn't require a ton of time. I often point out to people that a 5 to 10 minute a day habit is a great habit. Everybody wants to know what's the least amount of meditation I can do and get the advertised benefits of meditation. All this stuff we've been talking about in high-minded terms, but there are some easier to comprehend benefits from meditation: lower blood pressure, boosted immune system, literally rewiring key parts of the brain that have to do with focus and things like that. If 5 to 10 minutes sounds like too much for you, 1 minute most days, 1 minute daily-ish, is really enough to see what you need to see. Every time you sit, try to focus on your breath, see that you've become distracted. In that moment, that's the moment when most people think I've failed at meditation. It's actually the victory. And when you see how crazy you are when you've become distracted and learn how to start again and again and again, every time you see that you've become distracted, that's a win. And it's a win of really towering consequences, because then you see that you don't have to be owned by all that craziness.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Duncan Trussell's here. I've always wondered, like, what the boundaries of meditation are, because I don't really have the time to be sitting around all day meditating. But I always feel like anything, the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Right.
I would wonder, what can you do with your brain? Because, you know, Eddie Bravo has this friend of his. Right. He went to Egypt with this lady, and she was a Kundalini aficionado, like a serious devotee of Kundalini yoga. And what she said was that it was all about stimulating particular areas of your brain, and that what you're trying to do is like open up your chakras, and you can tune in to higher frequencies of consciousness. They can just meditate and get there, and they travel in their mind to like distinct different places. Tuning into a higher plane of consciousness.
I studied religion and psychology in school, so I got to do an internship at a Zen temple, and part of the internship is you do this thing called a sesshin, which is where you sit for like 3 days straight. just staring at this wall for 3 days straight in the lotus position. You sleep like 4 hours, and then the next day you wake up and immediately you eat, and then you go right back into meditating. Some certain amount of time in, they start chanting this thing called the Heart Sutra. And I don't remember the exact way it goes, but it's something like no mind, no body, no life, no death, no beginning, no... It's very psychedelic, it's very droney, and it's a negation of everything.
No mind, no body.
Nothing.
Say it again?
This is not an exact rendition,
Okay.
but as I recall, it's like no mind, no body, no life, no death, no beginning, no... It's.
And they say this all together?
Yeah, they all start chanting it.
That must be dope.
It's dope, and you've been staring at a wall
Let's
for
do
like
it together.
6...
What is it? No mind, no body.
It's not the exact
no
rendition.
life, no death. Let's just try that. Ready?
No mind, no body, no life, no death. No mind, no body, no life, no death.
There's something weird about that, dude. There's something zony. There's something hypnotic about any chant, even that. Yeah, I mean, what were they trying to do? They're trying to put themselves into a state of consciousness by humming like that.
I was just reading, there's a great book I'm reading by Pema Chodron called The Wisdom of No Escape. And she talks about how when people start meditating, they think, I'm doing this because I want to be a better person. And she said, that's actually an aggression against the self that you are right now. To be like, ooh, yeah.
That's interesting.
She said, meditation is not so that we become a better person. It's so that we're able to be who we are in the moment fully and to begin to experience fully what it is that's happening inside of us. So meditation is kind of like going into yourself and then exploring the places that you don't want to go into.
Cleaning them up.
You know what, man? It's feeling them. It's instead of cleaning or fixing or repairing, it's going in there and feeling the whatever it is. But what I'm going to do is for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, I'm going to let myself feel this thing that I've been trying not to feel by distracting myself with an incessant flow of thoughts.
Right.
And that is when you start lightening up, because really all you got to do is feel. I think the MAPS people say, feeling is healing.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
My guest today is my friend Rhonda Patrick. She is awesome. She's one of my favorite all-time podcast guests because she is just an overflowing fountain of information. She knows so much about health and wellness and the reactions that nutrients and vitamins have on the body. It's one of those podcasts. If you listen to this, you're probably going to want to listen to it several times and write stuff down and prepare yourself for a tsunami of knowledge.
So there's like over 100 trillion bacteria in your gut. And they're there because they're metabolizing the food you eat, making them into fatty acids and proteins, amino acids, things like that. They're breaking this down.
That's an amazing number.
Yeah, 100 trillion. They're also making vitamins and minerals. Well, you also have the highest concentration of immune cells in your gut. And the reason for that is because your gut is actually exposed to the external environment. So every time you eat food from the environment, your gut sees it. So if there's something pathogenic there, you need to have that immune response to make sure it's not going to take you out. So I think that, gut health and the immune system, there's a very, intimate connection between your gut health and your overall health, your heart health, your immune health, just everything. I think the gut health is indicative of your health status. And the other thing is there's a direct line from the gut to the brain. It's called the vagal nerve, where the bugs in the gut are sending signals to the brain via this vagal nerve.
Isn't that incredible when you think about that term, follow your gut instinct, that your gut really is communicating with your brain?
This is interesting because I think it goes both ways as well. Like, things that are good for the mind are also good for the body. And I've been getting into this meditation recently because I had my first flotation tank experience a couple days ago, I guess it was. I found that it was a very easy way for me to meditate, provide more of a structure. It's hard for me to meditate in general.
It's hard for everybody, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the more you do it, supposedly it becomes easier. I've been very interested in the benefits of meditation. And so the flotation was an interesting experience because I felt like it was definitely easier. There's a lot of brain benefits to meditation that are known. I mean, it's been shown to slow cognitive aging. There's one study where they looked at 50-year-old brains that have meditated for some years, and they looked like a 25-year-old brain. And a follow-up study showed that if you just take normal people after 8 weeks of like making them do this mindful type of meditation, they increase the volume of brain matter in 5 different regions of the brain. So meditation is affecting the brain. How it's doing that, there's a variety of possibilities. Something that I found very interesting was that it also affects the aging process in general, not just brain aging. So meditation's actually been shown to prevent the shortening of telomeres, which is super interesting. You're talking about slowing aging in general. And the way it does that is by activating the enzyme telomerase, which usually is not active in most of our cells. And meditation's able to activate that enzyme. The reason telomeres shorten is because every time you make a new cell, the telomere, it's got DNA, and just like anything else in your body, when your cell is replicating everything in the cell, the whole genome, it has to replicate the DNA of the telomere. Well, there's like this structural defect in the way the DNA is, that the machinery that replicates it like can't get to this little piece at the very end. So the machinery goes, okay, well, I've replicated it this far, I can't do the rest. And so it's like, screw it. So this little piece of telomere DNA doesn't get replicated. So the next cell has a telomere that's just a little bit shorter. And this keeps happening every time your cells divide and replicate. So eventually, decades later, you have really, really short telomeres, and then the cell can either undergo cell death or it can become senescent, which means it's basically not dead, but it's sitting around and it's secreting all this bad stuff that damages other cells. But you can rebuild those telomeres by activating telomerase. And telomerase then, even though the telomere is short, it will rebuild that piece that wasn't copied. So it can make it longer. That's not active in most of our cells. It's active in our stem cells, but meditation activates that gene that makes telomerase, and the telomerase becomes active and it rebuilds telomeres. I find that fascinating.
That's unbelievable.
That meditation can do that. I think the diet, lifestyle, meditation, exercise, if we could just get people motivated enough to realize this will really help them, like it really will, people will be so much happier. So
Some people just don't want to exercise. It's weird. It's so strange. It's
a lot of people.
Well, it's this fear of discomfort. People have this extreme feeling in their mind when it comes to exercise. They want to avoid discomfort. It's so hard for people to start anything new. It's hard for people to start a pottery class. Most people, their associations are to avoid anything that's uncomfortable. But it's so illogical, because when you look at comfort and you look at success and progress and the feelings of accomplishment and of getting past certain hurdles, a lot of those are connected to discomfort. Like, discomfort is your friend.
Right. You and I are both kind of obsessed with nutrition and exercise, and it's not just about looking good.
Right.
It's about aging. It's about being older and being fit and being mentally sharp and not being degenerate and decrepit. And how awful would that be to be like 60, which is young? I mean, 60 is still young, and to be like,
broken.
Broken.
Yeah, which is really common.
It's super common.
Stephen Pressfield has a book called The War of Art. I bought like 50 copies of it. I handed it out to people. It's great. He's been on this podcast before, and his book is essentially mostly about the creative pursuit, and it's about resistance that people feel when you should write, or you should paint, or whatever these things are that you pursue, and that there's this thing that comes up that tries to keep you from doing that, this resistance. And he's like, this is a battle that you will fight for the rest of your life. But the key is to fight it, not to give in. And every day you do so, you have won the battle for that day. And you will continue to fight that battle. And if you continue to fight that battle with that same mindset, you will win.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Sam Harris, author, awesome dude, and author of Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality. He's a very good friend of mine, one of the most intelligent and articulate people I know.
The center of spirituality for me is the phenomenon of self-transcendence, just the fact that it's possible to lose your sense of self, lose your sense of being an ego, lose your sense that you're a rider on the horse of consciousness riding around inside your head. Most people don't feel that they simply are their bodies. They feel like they have bodies, and that their bodies are kind of vehicle that they're riding around in, and they feel like they're behind their eyes in a way that they're not behind their knees. Most people most of the time feel that they're in their heads. But you can actually penetrate this illusion subjectively, and that the spirituality is the act of cutting through it subjectively and no longer feeling that you're an ego riding around inside a bag of skin, and that one's life improves in many obvious ways once one is able to cut through that illusion. This is kind of a sustained argument for disciplined introspection in the form of meditation and other techniques in the context of science and a discussion of the brain and why the conventional notion of self doesn't make much sense given what we know about the brain. You think you're the thinker of the thoughts. You think you're authoring your thoughts in a way that you're not. I mean, because thoughts just arise. We don't actually author them.
Isn't it fascinating that even in higher education, there's very little emphasis whatsoever on controlling thoughts, on managing thoughts, on managing your consciousness, on figuring out how to best analyze and approach your own thinking process? Because if you really think about it, like what we were talking about earlier about getting obsessed about something, getting into your mind and rolling over you, like that kind of process and that kind of runaway thought process can actually really negatively affect your life. And it can start a pattern that can create other events or other sort of neurotic type thinking that can affect your future. And if you can manage that and sort of nip that in the bud, that could benefit your future. That could benefit who you become, how you evolve, how you transform as a developing person. And yet, it's not really taught.
Yeah, well, there's mindfulness is actually increasingly current now, and it's a bit of a fad, but I think it's probably an enduring one because it's so useful. So mindfulness is now more and more being taught in schools. And the great thing about mindfulness is there's nothing spooky about it. All you have to do is pay extremely close attention to whatever is arising of its own. Very quickly, it becomes you're just noticing sights and sounds and sensations and moods and thoughts, and it makes perfect sense because if you want to know what it's like to be you, if you want to have a really clear look at the nature of your own consciousness, it just makes sense to pay attention. You're really just trying to witness just exactly what the character of your experience is in each moment. So you're just noticing unpleasant experience without pushing it away and noticing pleasant experience without trying to grab at it. And it just so happens that once you develop that kind of dispassionate attention to experience, then certain very pleasant experiences start to come along because so much of what's unpleasant about our minds is our resistance to pain and our grasping at pleasure and our struggle with experience. So just paying attention, really just openly and without any agenda, for the period of time you can do that, you really have surrendered the struggle. And tremendous relief just comes with that process. And the purpose of mindfulness is to discover that this self we think we have is an illusion. And the real breakthrough is not just a little less stress or a little more concentration or an ability to direct your mind where you want it to go. So if you want to stay on a diet but you're tempted by the chocolate chip cookie, you can just get back on your diet without eating the cookie. I mean, that's one way in which you could use mindfulness, but that's not really the center of the bullseye. The center of the bullseye is to cut through this illusion that we're all riding around in our heads as as a ghost in the machine.
So we're not riding around in our heads.
No.
What are we doing?
Well, you have a head, but
right.
We feel like we are having an experience. We feel like we are appropriating the experience, and we're doing it from a point behind our eyes. We're doing it from this sense of being a subject. But if you look for the subject, that sense of a center can drop out, and then there's just experience. That's very much like the flow states or the unified full immersion experiences that people have when you're paying attention to something so closely that you lose yourself in it, whether it's surfing or martial arts or whatever it is. There can be these experiences where for a moment there's no distance between, you're no longer looking over your own shoulder having the experience, you're no longer trying to surf, you're no longer thinking about how good the wave is or whether you're really on it. There's just a moment where there's just pure flow. There's a unified field of experience. Those are peak experiences for people. And then that's why a person would surf or do anything else which is giving them access to this state of consciousness where the self drops away and there's just experience. But the thing is, you can have that at any moment you remember to look for it once you know how to meditate. I mean, that is the nature of consciousness. People get tastes of self-transcendence in the context of beliefs, and then they become mightily attached to those beliefs because those beliefs seem to be the only explanation for the meaning of these experiences. So
That's
if
fascinating.
you're a Christian and you feel, absolute rapture and self-transcendence while praying to Jesus, well, of course, that's going to be a data point, if not the only needed data point in favor of the story that Jesus is the Son of God and he's taking an interest in your soul. And then there are people who have peak experiences at Burning Man, and have a totally different interpretation of their significance. There are Hindus who have experiences that are identical but are in the context of a totally different doctrine. So these experiences can't prove that any of these doctrines are true. What they prove is that the human mind is susceptible to altered states of consciousness, and some of which are really compelling and worth having. And yet we just have to understand them in a secular and universal sense, in a non-sectarian sense.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
All right, Rupert Sheldrake is here.
When I was in India, I was really into Hindu philosophy and Hindu ideas, and the idea that there's a greater consciousness within which our consciousness is embedded. We contact other realms of consciousness that aren't just inside our brains. Through meditation and through prayer, that one can actually contact other forms of consciousness bigger than our own. And then I had a Sufi teacher in India as well, so I did a sort of Islamic mysticism for a while. I then found a ashram, Christian ashram, where I lived for 2 years. It was very simple. We did yoga, we did meditation, we had Christian services, and we sang Indian chants. We started the Mass with a Hindu mantra asking the divine splendor of the sun to illuminate our meditation.
I grew up a Catholic. I was only a practicing Catholic when I was very young. I went to a Catholic school for first grade, and it was a bad school. It was like suppressing, and it essentially shied me away from all religion at a very young age.
Some people reject the entire world of religion because of personal bad experiences with one particular brand. I think it's rather like throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
It would be like saying, I'm against science because it gave us gas that Hitler used to kill people, and there are really bad things that have been done by humans in the name of almost anything you care to mention: nationalism, science, religion, politics, ideology. A lot of my friends are atheists or agnostic. The problem I have with atheists and materialists is that most of them are more dogmatic than the people I know within the religious world.
Well, I have a problem with anybody that's sure.
So do I, yes.
When I speak to some atheists, I have this issue where they're aggressively atheist. They get upset at anyone who's not. My question to them is always, like, have you ever had a psychedelic experience? Like, if you don't go into that experience, like, I think we live our lives based on the experiences that we've accumulated, what we've learned from these experiences, and what we've learned from other people's experiences, what we've read, what we've seen in documentaries and films. But when you have a really intense psychedelic experience particularly, and then for some people yoga and meditation, some people are able to achieve some pretty deep states.
No, I couldn't agree more about the opening that it can give. For me, it corresponded in many ways with what people talk about near-death experiences, because I went out through light into a realm of great bliss and beauty, and then I came back, and it was like coming back from a million miles away and just coming back into my body and, as it were, being born again. So it was very much like a death and rebirth experience for me, and was very, very transformative.
Wow, that is quite fascinating, and it makes sense if you think about ordeal poisoning being the substitute for psychedelics in certain cultures where they don't have access to psychedelic plants. They would take essentially a poison that didn't kill you. It got you right to the door. They use that for these ritualistic coming-of-age rituals. And then when they come through on the other side, they're a better person because of it.
Yes.
They're more reflective. They're sort of appreciate just the very breath that they're allowed to take. They appreciate the sky seems bluer, the grass seems greener, the life has more vibrancy to it because they've gone through this ordeal poison or this toxic venom or what have you.
Yes, a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Almost all rites of passage for adolescence in traditional cultures involve something like a death and rebirth experience. I think you're right. I think that's what's going on. And I think that at the core of all religions is this direct experience of the divine. You know, I think that's what they all come from. They come from experience, not theories.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
My guest today is one of the best fighters on the planet Earth. He is the former UFC light heavyweight champion, and he's a guy who's been through a lot of controversy over the last couple of years. So give it up for Jon Jones. You've been on a crazy ride, not just through July, but for the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
What are you disappointed in yourself with a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, I am. I totally am. I was in a point in my life then when I was winning all these fights. I was the it boy in the UFC, sponsored by Nike and Gatorade and greatest of all time, finishing legend after legend. Just really in this position where I felt so untouchable, and I just felt like everything was meant to go my way in that time of my life. I think I just took everything that I had for granted. And that morning I got in a car accident, man, it was a huge reality check.
How old are you now? You 30?
29.
29? It's your athletic prime.
Yeah.
That's at your best. Really, your prime is like 32.
That's why I know that right now I'm in a position to do some magnificent and extraordinary things. I know that because I've made so many mistakes, I make the perfect person to still be able to inspire millions of people. There's very few people who are perfect and flawless and just that clean-cut, never did anything wrong athlete. There's way more people who are like me, doing wild shit. Way more people who have let their parents down, let their families down, let their friends down, let themselves down. And because I made so many mistakes on such a big scale and so public, I feel like all the great things that I do from here on out are going to be that much greater. I feel like my best is yet to come. I'm in a position to really touch a lot of people and inspire a lot of people because of where I came from. So I'm really excited.
Is that something you concentrate on more than you concentrate? I mean, do you concentrate on that as much as you concentrate on just doing it for yourself?
Doing it for other people motivates me probably more than doing it for myself. I just feel like ultimately I've already gotten so much out of the sport, and what I need to do is to truly get something. What I really need is to know that I'm changing lives. Like, that motivates me more than anything else right now.
Do you meditate, Jon?
I used to meditate a lot. Now I'm more big into visualization.
When did you used to meditate?
Around 2010, 2011, I went through this huge spiritual thing where I became obsessed with the power of the mind. And I got into it deep, like really deep, just meditation, visualization, and just realizing how powerful our minds actually are, like how we really do paint our world with our thoughts and level of self-belief. And so I just took myself to this different mental level where I took myself from being an average Joe to actually believing that I was the shit and believing that I could be the shit and that I could be the GOAT and be the greatest and never lose. And I took myself to a different place mentally, and a lot of it came from mental practice and meditation and visualization and just seeking knowledge from people who are strong believers that I just became really obsessed with, just learning about the power of the mind. So I used to meditate. Now I just I have a lot of things that stuck with me, a lot of ways of believing that stuck with me that just subconsciously I know who I am, what I'm capable of, and how I believe, and how powerful my mind actually is. I have a good way of detaching something inside of me and seeing what's happening and oh no, it's not over. All you gotta do is just do this, do that, and you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I do have the capability of taking away who I actually am at this point and realizing that this is just a part of me, or this is just a situation in my life. This isn't my actual life.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Alex Gray is here. So strap in. One of my favorite artists in the history of the universe. How about that? I think you represent a very positive and a very unusual force in the world of art and in the world of consciousness as well. What do you think that is, that feeling that you get when you see a beautiful sunset or a beautiful forest, in the mountains and a lake and that perfect classic scene? Or if I see a beautiful painting or a beautiful piece of art, it's the same thing. It gives you that wow, that's what we're looking for all the time, this powerful expression.
We crave it. I think it's actually something that human beings either secretly or not so secretly crave in looking at other people and in finding it in their lives. I kind of think that's almost an aesthetic and spiritual quest in itself, to find the beauty in the moment, is actually a profound state to be in.
We should explain to people what Entheon is. What you're doing is essentially you're building a temple.
Yeah.
You're building a work of art that it's kind of fascinating because it's the weirdest, craziest, coolest looking building I've ever seen in my life. And if you do completely build it this way, it's really going to be one of the coolest things on earth. I mean, it's a building that's a work of art, and it's a stunning work of art.
It's very interesting because it makes a statement, and I see it as within a lineage of the development of different kinds of sacred architecture, and just one other little bud on that tree. But it's attempting to point to the underlying unity of the quest for wisdom and compassion in all the different religious quests. And all world religions were born with the visionary mystical experience, with an infinite intermediate realm between the physical, material world and the transcendental world. And all the really mystical traditions have them. And we've just kind of lost track of them.
I remember when I was a kid, they would say, like, oh, he's got such an imagination, this one. But it's really where everything comes from. And that's the weirdest thing about it, is the imagination conjures up an idea which becomes a laptop. It conjures up an idea which becomes an airplane. It all comes from the imagination. I mean, the imagination is crazy. The imagination has done some amazing things for human beings in this world, and yet we still don't give it the credit it deserves. It's kind of shocking. You know, imagination is like the most underrated thing of all time.
And yet it's the foundation of all our advancement.
Yeah, you know what's been really tripping me out is how many people that I know that are starting to have semi, at least, psychedelic experiences from doing yoga. I've had maybe one time in my life where I did yoga and I felt like I was high. I felt like I was high on marijuana. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
At the end of it, it was like, wow. It's just like whatever it is that switch that you can hit when you do the right poses for the right amount of time with the right amount of energy, there's a weird switch that you hit at the end where I was literally high. But that's as far as I've ever taken it. I've never had a hallucination. I've never astrally projected. But I have heard some of the craziest things from people that practice Kundalini yoga that if I didn't know them really well and the way they were telling it to me is like so matter-of-factly, I would say, this guy's crazy. He's just making up a bunch of shit. Except for the one time that I got myself high. I had love in my heart. I wanted to hug people. I felt like colors were brighter, sounds were cleaner. I really felt really high. And it was just from doing yoga.
Yes.
And I was like, if that's possible, I've never really continually practiced Kundalini, but the people who really get into pranayamas and all that, they say that there's a wavelength that you can hit where you tap into that, whatever it is, the pineal gland, open up the doorway and punch right through, and that you can do it through yoga.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you done it through yoga?
The idea for Entheon really came about, first of all, through Allison and I had a routine of yoga and then meditation. And during that period, instead of forcing myself to imagine something, I was saying, God, what would you like me to put there? And so it showed the interconnected head type thing.
It's perfect. Isn't the word religion fairly loaded, though? And isn't what's important the idea behind what you're trying to do, right? The idea is that you're trying to make this sacred place. You're trying to make this amazing place where people can go and see expression and see the purity of your creative vision. Why connect that to a loaded word?
Because I feel that we're intimately connected with whatever that religious impulse. And if you look at what is the primary religious experience, that is a mystical experience. Religio, to reconnect, to connect up, to link back.
Is that what the word means?
Yes, to relink, to reconnect. To what? The self, to God. The self and God are
so
one.
That's the actual origin of the word religion? Religio?
Yes.
Is it a Latin word?
And French. I
French.
think.
And it's to reconnect. So the idea being that the religion or these churches were set up so that people could reconnect with God. So they go about their day, they're filled with troubles and strife and all sorts of stress, and they can go back to the church and they can reconnect with God through religion.
If you go to Egypt or you go to these pilgrimage places, and there is tremendous power because a lot of people invested a lot of love energy into a center, and they built a shrine to whatever they believed that spirit to be. And that is part of a long tradition of a connectedness with their lens into the infinite, whatever religion you're looking through. Iconic, aniconic, the primary religious experience. Every religion started with a mystical experience. And so, what do you disconnect from that whole tradition where people were connecting to the infinite before? You say, this has nothing to do with that. Or do you say, what if we reimagine it? What if we reimagine God? Can't we do it and say, this has a lot going for it, this quest for the infinite, absolute mystery that's at the core of our being and the core of the cosmos. This quest to know that, it leads to science, it leads to art. It's the quest to know the truth about the nature of reality. So any good religion ought to, their view of reality, at least science, ought to be incorporated into it. All religions are connected and are basically talking about the one spirit that moves through all of us. You can call it creative spirit. I prefer to call it something like that rather than some of the names that get so heavily weighted. But I'm comfortable with the word God. To me, God means just ultimate mystery.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Please welcome Tom Papa.
My youngest wants to go to church, and
how old?
13.
And because friends, what is it?
Maybe she has more of a sensitivity, and like she knows there's something spiritual going on, and she's searching a little bit,
right?
And she wants that. She likes being able to sit someplace, and we go. And people used to think, my grandmother just thought church is the best, and this is the best, and they didn't ask questions.
Yeah.
Now we know everything, and we know that all these institutions are flawed. And I think we're making the mistake that you can't be a part of a political party, you can't be a part of a community, you can't be a part of a thing if it's not perfect. But that's not a way to live. You got to kind of allow things to be flawed. And it's so upsetting because I'm really kind of searching a little bit because I was raised Catholic and I did like going, I have what she has. I did like going and sitting in the pew on Sunday was different from the other days. Yeah. And I got to hear people talk about being nice to each other, and I got to see the people from my town who you saw running around, but now they're just sitting there quietly and praying. There was goodness to it.
Yeah.
And they went out and fed the homeless. There was good stuff that came from it. And she wants that. I get that. Any of your children ask about it? They don't even bring it up?
We've talked about God.
Yeah.
My basic take is, Jordan Peterson said something really lovely. He said he behaves as if God is real.
Yeah.
He behaves as if God exists.
Interesting.
Not that he believes God exists, because that's sort of it's a bit of an intellectual trap, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you say, do you believe God exists? Like, okay, define God.
No, then you're
what
in the
weeds.
What does that
mean?
Yeah.
Because do you think that I think that there's a city in the clouds? No, I don't.
Right.
No, I don't.
Do you think that there's an energy, like we were talking
is
before?
Is it possible
that
there's something bigger than all this thing? Well, there's bigger than everything. I mean, in our perspective, when we're talking about things, it's like we're so small. The way we interface with reality, so crude, even though it's amazing. I really firmly believe you only have so much bandwidth in a day. And this is coming from a person who pushes their bandwidth too hard all the time. I think you only have so much in a day. Mm-hmm. And when you get to a certain state, you wind up diminishing a lot of the other things that you do. Like if you have like 7 things cooking in the background on your phone, it's not going to move as fast. People do that too. You have too many things cooking at the same time.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah,
all the time.
All the time.
And then you take 20 minutes of meditation and take your nervous system and put it on restart. The result of it is you come out and you've rebooted the system.
Do you have a technique you use? Do you use an app?
No, I went to a transcendental meditation teacher.
Whoa.
And without the hippy-dippy, it literally makes you realize just what you said. We're all just frazzled and running out of steam at a certain point.
Yeah.
Your nervous system is shot. All that stuff that's happened just between 7 o'clock and 3 o'clock, whatever would happen, that nervous system has been dealing with a ton of stimulus all day long. That meditation gives you a reboot. It's like a needed thing that's better than sleep, that it actually yearns for. I'm telling you, since I really started dialing it in and did it, the best way I can describe it is that it added another 4 hours to my day.
Whoa. How so?
Because I would just be limping across the finish line. I'd be exhausted. I'd be trying to do, and with motivation, and I work really hard, I would push through and get to maybe 2 hours more of what I needed to accomplish. When you do this effortlessly, without struggle, I'm able to just sail like I did between 9 and 12 that day.
Really?
Yes, 100%.
Do you think by using this practice, you're alleviating tension, so you're more efficient with your energy? Like, what makes you...
That's part of it, but it really is taking this nervous system that is dealing with the outside world all the time and just giving it a real practical way to shut down, flatline, and then come back on the grid.
That's interesting. And how long have you been doing this? Probably
about 3 years ago, my friend said, go just see if it dials you in. Just go talk to this guy. And I did. For like 3-4 sessions, I went and just talked to this guy here in L.A. who's a transcendental meditation teacher. And he just explained it. And for the last 3-4 years, I haven't missed a day.
Wow.
And
3 or 4 years?
Yeah,
Every day?
Every day. It's like 20 minutes. If you can get 2 in, that's the best. If you can get 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, then you're like Superman.
Wow.
But if you can get 1 in, I'm telling you.
Do you feel that way when you exercise? Do you feel like when you exercise that you get into like a zone and you reset your brain?
For sure.
Yeah.
I feel less depressed when I exercise.
Yeah.
Like if I'm in a funk and I'm like, oh, I don't want to, and I go for a run, I'm like, my day's different.
Yeah, it's weird. It's almost like that funk is trying to hold on to control too. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's like it's tricking your brain.
Yeah.
Thinking, dude, you feel like shit today. I was like, let me just put these damn shoes on and go run.
Yeah.
You know.
You feel so good. But the meditation is different. The meditation is like the run will give me energy. I won't feel so shitty. I'm like, I'm okay. You know, I feel good. I feel alive and whatever. But the meditation, in a very subtle way, 5 hours later, when you're faced with a stressful situation, you don't feel as stressed as you normally would.
Yeah.
Because it's just your nervous system, which is very powerful, has been rebooted and is now able to go and deal with another situation.
Especially for someone like you, right, whose job is to create things.
Yeah.
Right? To put your mindset into a particular place is super beneficial if you're just creating things all the time.
Totally. But it's for everybody.
Right.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Boom. Michael Shermer's here, ladies and gentlemen.
Deepak just released a paper that was published this week. He wasn't one of the authors, but it was on the effects of his program on biomarkers and various physiological changes. So this was conducted by Harvard medical scientist named Rudy Tanzi. Rudy is the scientist who discovered the genes for Alzheimer's. So he does a lot of work with Alzheimer patients. To what extent do we have any meds to treat it? Not really. What about meditation? What about diet? These kinds of things. It's not terribly hopeful, but maybe some of these supplements, who knows. But anyway, he wanted to know what are the effects of meditation on just regular people. So they went to the La Costa Resort and Spa. There's already a 6-day program that the Chopra Center runs with. It's Ayurvedic, but it's yoga, it's meditation, it's food, diet. And so they compared vacationers who were just staying there at the resort. They took all their various biological markers to novice meditators. They taught them right there. This is it, day 1. Here's what we do. Go through it 20 minutes and 30 minutes, and so meditation, yoga. And then a group of people that were already there that were serious daily meditators. They've been doing it their whole lives, right? So there was a difference. Okay, first of all, everybody got better. Your blood pressure goes down, stress hormones are practically zero, and all these great markers, including the vacationers. Then they found a difference between the vacationers and the meditation group. So the claim is that you can go on vacation, but you can't do that every day of your life. But you can meditate every day of your life. So the effects of meditation may be something like you can do it at home. The relaxation, the meditation, the focused whatever you call that, focused thought on your mantra, actually has physiological changes, one of which was affecting beta amyloids, which are the chemicals that cause the plaques and tangles in neurons that cause Alzheimer's. So Rudy's argument was that it could be, there's sort of a causal chain there, that meditation leads to less stress, less inflammation, and therefore less of these build-up plaques and tangles around the neurons that kills them. Because that's what happens in Alzheimer's. Your brain just dies, neurons die. So amongst various factors that might be effective, meditation may work.
I think that what you're saying about meditation and other things that you do that relax you, I think it's very important to relax. And I think we all know that. And that's one of the real problems with our world. Our society today is so go, go, go that it's like if you are an athlete and you train constantly, one of the most important things is recovery. It's a critical aspect of athleticism. And if you just train and you don't recover, your body breaks down.
Right.
You're redlining your system, and you're not giving your system the proper time to recover. I think that when you meditate, and for me, my big one is the sensory deprivation tank. I have one in my basement.
You do?
And I go in it all the time. And in doing that, I feel like that is, there's no motion at all. I'm concentrating completely on my breathing until I achieve this certain state of consciousness that I get to when I go in there. And the way I get to it is just concentrating entirely on breathing in and breathing out. And I just think about in with the good and out with the bad, and in with the good. And that's my only thoughts that I try to maintain. Other thoughts get in there, they bounce around, and they ricochet out, and eventually they stop existing.
So that is meditation.
It's meditation.
Yeah.
But I think any form of just give your body a chance to give your heart rate a chance to drop, give your mind a chance to slow its revolutions per minute. Just give yourself some time to recover.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
My guest here today is a man named Rich Roll. Rich is a very cool individual, a very intelligent guy, an author, a vegan, and ultra endurance athlete, podcaster. He has the Rich Roll podcast, which is available on iTunes. Just very thoughtful and interesting guy.
Let's just talk about meditation and mindfulness practices. Anybody who has a consistent meditation practice will tell you that it improves their life. It's been huge in my life. It's so counterintuitive. Like, I would rather go out and do a 4-hour run than sit down for 20 minutes in the morning before I leave the house and engage in that practice. And, over the last 6 or 8 months, I've really kind of dedicated myself to it, by prioritizing it. And it's really, it has been great.
What do you do? How do you do it?
I've played around with so many different techniques over the years, and, you were talking about momentum earlier, right? Like, I've never been able to, hit momentum with it. Like, I'll do it for a couple days, this version, that version, and I could never find a way to really stick with it. And I downloaded the iPhone app. It's got guided meditation programs on it. And it's a super simple app, and you just open it up, and it's got a whole series of programs that you can do. And I just put the earbuds in, and he just kind of talks you through it. So he takes the thinking out of it, and it just makes it easy. And I've been able, just something about the ease of that, I guess. I've been able to kind of just do it and create momentum around it. And like anything else, once you have momentum, and once you start to see the benefits of it, then you're more, enthusiastic about pursuing it further.
What benefits have you found from this meditation?
The biggest thing that I found is that I'm able to navigate stressful situations much more gracefully. I'm far less reactive to people. I'm able to kind of calmly take information out, engage it, and then respond more mindfully. And I'm able to, I've got a lot of stuff going on right now. It's like, it's just, and to be able to kind of not get anxious over that and just be able to say, okay, focus on one thing at a time and not get worked up about the smaller stuff, and just ultimately much more productive and constructive in my interactions with other people, focused when I'm working, present with my wife and my kids, and calmer. And that's impacted my sleep as well. It's been cool. I think the benefits have exceeded what I expected. I don't know how, I didn't expect it to be any crazy difference, but it's been really great.
That's very cool. I'm going to look into that. I'm definitely going to download that app. That's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Do you the sensory deprivation tank?
I've been wanting to do that for so long. I know you're big into that. I know that I would really dig it.
Yeah, I have a tank. I have a tank in my basement.
What are the benefits of that?
Removes the mind from the body. In that tank, there is no data. The water's the same temperature as your skin, so you will get to a point where you don't feel it. There's 1,000 pounds of salt in that water, so you'll float effortlessly, and you're in total darkness. In the absence of that input, your brain becomes supercharged.
And the more that I learn about this world of mindfulness, it's untapped reservoirs of
potential,
personal potential. Exactly. This idea that your thinking mind is distinct from your higher consciousness, and to the extent that you have control and you can harness your thinking mind for your benefit and you're able to silence the idle negative chatter, there's a looping. And my mind loops as much as the next person, and generally it's not very kind things that are looping. You know, self-defeatist ideas, negative thoughts. And meditation allows you to understand that you don't have to engage in that, and gives you a toolbox to say, let me tell a different story. I don't have to entertain that story that I've been listening to my entire life, that's led me down a certain path in my life and helped sort of forge a certain trajectory. What if I tell a new story?
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Today, my guest is one of my best friends on the planet. He is the founder of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. He's a fantastic human being, one of the best jiu-jitsu instructors. He's a great musician. Give it up for Eddie Bravo.
I became obsessed with finding out what life really is. That's why I'm fascinated with ancient cultures and what they did. Is there an afterlife? Is there some kind of higher power? The ancient Indians believed, from India, they believe, they dubbed it the Akashic Records. There's a river of infinite information that you can have access to, the answers to everything through meditation and just through controlling your own frequency. It's been done. The most famous in the West was Edgar Cayce. He had the knowledge to tap into this information and no one can figure it out. He has like 13 or 14,000 documented readings. He got huge. The president came to him. He was a guy with a third grade education, but when he went under in his medium state, he had the answers to everything. It was
Have anybody debunked Edgar Cayce?
You can't debunk him.
Really?
He smashes. You just look into him. He smashes. He knew in 1920, he knew like the function of every gland. We're finding the shit he's saying. We're finding out the shit now. Right. That he was right. He would rattle off like the pituitary gland and give you like what vitamins you need to take, what's its function, going through all the glands, and people thought he's crazy. But he had it documented. MDs are going back and studying his readings and going, holy shit. You can't debunk him. He had the power. He had the power to reach, and he's not the only one. There's a lot of people that could do it. Meditation helps. So if there is this infinite river of knowledge, what the hell is it? Who created it? What's it for? Is there consciousness behind it? Did something create it? When we exist in the spirit world, are we like this super infinite? I mean, because if you listen to the mystics and ancient cultures, the mediums, if you look at all the things they all agree on, they all say, in the other dimension, there's no time. There's no past. There's no present. There's just now. Everything happens at the same time. No human can actually understand that or understand what that feels. They can't wrap their brain around it. I can't. I can say it, but I don't really know what it feels like.
Do you believe in God?
Of course. But you can call it not like the bearded manner.
No,
but
the creator.
Like there is a higher power. There is intelligent design. There's something way beyond us. Way beyond.
It might not be that simple. It might be something like we're moving towards becoming that. It might be that. It might be that there is no God and there is no one who's at the wheel of this whole thing, but that the whole thing is moving in a direction. The way to move in the correct direction is to move towards God, is to move towards love, is to move towards friendship and happiness. And that's why when you crack through to the next stage and you go over there, it's like not even that there's a thing behind it, but it's that you are it. You are that thing.
Exactly.
We
like
all are that
We're
thing.
all water molecules in the ocean. That's one of the conclusions and theories based on all the shit that I've heard. It seems like an ocean. It is like God is one. God is the ocean, but we're all part of it. We're all like a water molecule. We're all affected.
I've been to churches before. They have a really nice sense of community. They're very nice to each other. And they really promote that. They promote like that feeling of family and that positive frequency. And it does really, it really makes a difference, man. You know, and I really support that. I think that's awesome. But just because the ideology happens to be in a good frequency. But if you break down what the ideology stands for, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely doing some good, but so would just being nice. It would do the exact same thing. Yeah. So would just being humble and giving in to love and just being nice to people.
Yeah. For me, my opinion on religions is if it's based on unconditional love and doing the right thing, different religions are just like, it's a way to get your soul in the right frequency. Some people do yoga. Some people meditate.
It's an idea of just believing in something and then having a code that you live by and moving your life always in a positive way.
Yeah.
And that's good, no matter what you call it. Whether you call it Hindu, whether you call it Kundalini Yoga, whether you call it Catholicism. If you're really moving in a positive direction and you really believe in love and you really are being warm and open, and you give in. The idea of giving into a higher power is not because God wants you to be humble or God wants you to be in awe of his greatness. What it is saying there's something above you, so not taking yourself so seriously and instead not being out for number one and sort of realizing that we are together, like there is a brotherhood and a sisterhood of man. That's really what it's supposed to be all about. That's the good of religion. And that's where I've seen religion help people for sure.
I think religion, if you do it right and you always look to do the right thing, and life is all about selflessness and unconditional love.
And what people don't understand is that benefits you. Do that and do it in a selfish way. I mean, it sounds stupid, but if you're a selfish person, you really want to succeed, you really want good things for you, you want to do it selfishly, be nice to everybody. That's the best way to get ahead. The best way to get ahead is just be nice to everybody. Tip people whenever you can. Tip more than you're supposed to tip. Give people hugs when you can. Be nice to people all the time. When you put out that good energy, you get good energy back. You can like almost think of it in it like people are like, I'm looking out for number one. You really want to look out for number one? Look out for everybody else. Look out for everybody else, and that's how you really look out for number one.
Absolutely.
I have had the most benefit in my life by being nice to people. The most benefit in my life by being generous and being friendly and being warm. And when I run into someone, especially now at this stage of my life, when I've had my own successes and failures and I've kind of assessed what helps me and what doesn't help me, when I run into someone that's life is a mess, and I run into someone that's got a lot of troubles, if it's not a big chunk of what got them there is the way they think about things, the way they behave. Do nice things, and nice things come from it.